we continue to hold our principled line on the use of the right to veto in the Security Council to make sure that this responsible organ of the UN takes balanced, responsible decisions in line with the aspirations of its peoples.
That was the permanent representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations, Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia, speaking through a translator this past Monday at the UN General Assembly plenary meeting on the use of the veto. The upcoming debate of the General Assembly, which features heads of state from around the world, begins this coming Tuesday, and it's certain to include a variety of attempts by the U.S. and its allies to curb the power of the veto at the Security Council, particularly the power of the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China to thwart Western efforts at the Security Council on matters affecting various parts of the world. However, this particular game is going to take place inside of a new world as context. For more on that, we go to Philadelphia to speak with Professor Tony Monteiro from the Saturday Free School. Professor Monteiro?
Some tremendous changes in the world. Certainly it's a move from what was called a unipolar world, a world dominated by U.S. hegemony, to now what looks like a multipolar world, what I like to call a new democratic international order. And we saw this unfold at the BRICS conference in Johannesburg, which expanded from BRICS to BRICS +6 now. And then the G20 meeting in New Delhi about a week or so after that meeting, where, again, you had many heads of state. Of course, Putin and Xi Jinping did not attend. Some say because Biden would be there and they didn't feel like having to deal with him. But at any rate, the G20, which is the G7 plus emerging markets, did not do what the West and the United States wanted them to do, and that is denounce Russia and what is the war in Ukraine, and in a certain way to denounce China and Xi Jinping under the guise of the fight for democracy. None of that occurred. The Indian diplomats would not allow it. So the West, the G7, as it were, was completely set back on its heels. And the emerging markets, a good number of them, now a part of BRICS +6, held the day. And the United States was isolated. And as we go on now to the next G20, and I think it will be in Brazil, Bolsonaro, the president of Lula, I should say, the president of Brazil, is not going to allow the G20 to be dominated by the West. This is very, very important. And of course, all of this comes on the heels of the coup d'etat in Niger, which in effect overthrew an unpopular pro-Western regime, which had not fulfilled its promises to the people. There was a little talk a while there of the ECOWAS nations headed by Nigeria invading Niger, but a number of nations, including Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and maybe even Algeria, said that if that occurs, they would defend the sovereignty of Niger against Nigeria and what are called the ECOWAS countries. But a big blow to the West was the recently concluded conference or summit between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. This is highly significant. When you put all of these things together, and of course many others, what we see is a crisis of the neo-colonial system itself. And especially significant, and many people don't understand this, the split between North and South Korea, as it were, the Democratic Republic, People's Republic of Korea, the North, and the Republic of Korea, the South, that divide separates the Korean Peninsula between the South, which is militarily occupied by the United States and is hence a neo-colony of the United States, and the North, which is not a neo-colony of the West or anyone else, and has pursued an independent policy in the building of socialism and democracy, and the building of a defense capability to defend the gains of the North Korean people, which are actually the gains of the Korean people. I say all of that to say that we have to introduce a new conceptualization into our lexicon, and that is the crisis of neo-colonialism, or of the neo-colonial system. This is a very important thing. The interesting aspect of this is that a good part of the American people, in their standing up against the war in Ukraine and wars other places, create a crisis in the United States, which in effect parallels the crisis of neocolonialism. Let me say that again. The political crisis in the United States, a crisis of legitimacy, a crisis of regime governance, a crisis of the ruling elite versus the masses of people. That crisis parallels the crisis of neocolonialism, which affects at least 100 of the nations in what they now call the global South.
So if you look at this, with a long historical view, I mean, you can look at elements like Korea, for example. The U.S. occupation of South Korea is in fact, and in law and as a military practice, the continuation of the Japanese occupation that began in the 1920s. And this is coming to a crisis there. But overall, this entire construct, they began assembling it back at the end of the 15th century. And it's been ascendant with some contradictions, but pretty much since then until the recent period. And now you're seeing the people around the world who have been on the business end of this for centuries finally figuring out our unity is going to be our liberation.
Yeah, that's very true. And this, a lot of people can't fully grasp what neocolonialism is. The great African leader Kwame Nkrumah wrote a book back in the mid-'60s called Neocolonialism, the Highest Stage of Imperialism. And he laid out all of the mechanisms that are used by the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the financial institutions of the West, and in particular the United States. And then, of course, the dollar and the franc in particular, and the pound, being de facto the currencies of all of these African nations, right. Which means they're tied to the trade and investment strategies of the West. That is coming to an end. A tremendous development.
Yes.
A lot of times neocolonialism was defined as financial colonialism. It's not just in the past with classical colonialism or the original form of colonialism, where you shipped plants and you imported from those countries raw materials, and everything about extraction. Well, we're looking at something different today. The Belt and Road Initiative of China, the other institutions of the Belt and Road, and of BRICS, including a BRICS bank that might at some point supersede the World Bank. We're looking at a whole new world.
That's right. Professor Monteiro, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Okay, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.